The crimson trail led Isaac Kane's eye from the dusty creek road to the crumpled form of a woman lying face down in the shallow water, her dark hair fanning out like ink in the current. And he knew in that instant his simple supply run to Eagle Pass had just become something else entirely. Isaac dismounted in one fluid motion, his boots splashing into the creek before his brain fully registered the decision to move. The woman's dress was torn across her back, revealing a long gash that oozed blood into the water around her. He turned her gently, expecting her to be dead, but her eyes fluttered open for just a moment, unfocused and filled with pain before closing again. She was young, maybe 22 or 23, with a delicate face now pale as limestone. He pressed his bandana against the wound on her back, trying to assess the damage while keeping her head above water. The cut looked like it had come from a knife, deliberate and vicious. Her breathing was shallow, her pulse weak but present beneath his fingertips when he checked her neck. Blood stained the front of her dress too, and he found another wound across her ribs, not as deep but still serious. Isaac looked around the empty landscape of South Texas scrubland, the June sun beating down mercilessly. Eagle Pass was 6 miles back the way he had come. The nearest homestead in this direction was 10 miles, maybe more, and he had no guarantee anyone would be there. His horse, Thunder, stood nearby, but the woman needed immediate attention and riding might jostle her wounds open worse. He made his decision in the span of a heartbeat. Isaac pulled off his shirt, tore it into strips, and bound her wounds as best he could, working quickly despite the steadiness of his hands. 28 years of living hard had taught him basic field medicine. The bandages would not hold forever, but they might buy her the time she needed. Then he lifted her from the creek. She weighed barely anything in his arms, light as a child despite being a grown woman. Water streamed from her dress, and she made a small sound of pain but did not wake. Isaac positioned her carefully against his chest, her head resting in the crook of his elbow, and began to walk. The sun was past its peak, but still brutal. Sweat began to pour down Isaac's bare back within minutes. He kept his stride steady, long steps eating up the ground. Thunder followed behind without being told, trained well enough to stay close. The road stretched ahead like a promise that kept receding. After the first mile, Isaac's arms began to burn. He shifted the woman slightly, trying to distribute her weight better without jostling her wounds. Her breathing remained shallow, and he could feel her heartbeat against his chest, fast and thready. She was going into shock. "Stay with me," he said quietly, though he doubted she could hear. "Just stay with me." The second mile was harder. The muscles in his shoulders screamed, and his arms trembled with the sustained effort. He focused on putting one foot in front of the other, matching his breathing to his steps. The woman's face was peaceful despite her injuries, her features soft in unconsciousness. She had high cheekbones and a stubborn chin, full lips now drained of color. Pretty, he thought distantly, then pushed the observation away. Pretty did not matter if she died in his arms. Halfway through the third mile, he stumbled. His boot caught on a rock, and he went to one knee hard, jarring them both. The woman cried out, a thin sound of agony, and her eyes opened again. "Who?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Isaac Kane," he said, already pushing back to his feet despite the way his thigh muscle had seized from the impact. "I found you by the creek. I am taking you to Eagle Pass. There is a doctor there. They—" She started, then coughed. Blood flecked her lips. "They are coming back." Ice ran down Isaac's spine despite the heat. "Who is coming back?" But her eyes had closed again, and she went limp once more. He quickened his pace, ignoring the fresh wave of pain from his knee. If whoever had done this was coming back, he needed to move faster. The fourth mile stretched like a lifetime. Isaac's vision began to swim at the edges, dark spots dancing in his peripheral vision. Dehydration and exhaustion warred with determination. He thought about setting her down, taking a drink from his canteen, but he was afraid if he stopped moving he would not start again. The wound on her back had bled through his makeshift bandages, and he could feel the warm wetness against his forearm. "Tell me your name," he said to her unconscious form, needing the sound of his own voice to keep himself grounded. "When you wake up, you tell me your name. You hear me? I am carrying you 6 miles, and I deserve to know your name." Thunder whickered behind him, and Isaac glanced back to see the horse's ears pricked forward, alert. He followed the animal's gaze and saw the dust cloud on the horizon behind them. Riders, at least 3 of them, coming fast. Isaac cursed and forced his exhausted legs into something resembling a run. His arms were past pain now, settled into a deep, burning numbness. The woman bounced against his chest, and he tried to smooth his gait, but there was no good way to run while carrying someone. Each step jarred them both. The riders were gaining. Isaac could hear them now, the thunder of hooves growing louder. He was maybe 2 miles from Eagle Pass still, too far to outrun mounted men. He looked around desperately for cover, but saw nothing except open scrubland and the occasional mesquite tree, nothing that would hide them or provide defense. "Kane," a voice shouted behind him. "Stop right there." Isaac kept moving, one foot in front of the other. The woman in his arms made a small sound, and he looked down to see her eyes open again, clearer this time despite the pain written across her face. "Do not stop," she whispered. "Please do not give me back to them." "Never," he promised, and he meant it with a ferocity that surprised him. The riders caught up within another 100 yards. 3 men, rough-looking and armed, spread out to block the road ahead. Isaac stopped, breathing hard, and turned to keep them all in his line of sight. Thunder moved to stand beside him, a solid presence. The man in the middle was older, maybe 50, with a face like weathered leather and eyes hard as flint. He wore a deputy's badge on his vest, tarnished and bent. "That there is my wife," he said, nodding toward the woman in Isaac's arms. "She ran off this morning, got herself hurt in her hysteria. I will take her home now." Isaac looked down at the woman. Her eyes met his, and in them he saw terror and desperation, not hysteria, not madness, fear. "Your wife, you say," Isaac said slowly. He was buying time, letting his breathing settle, assessing the situation. All 3 men had guns on their hips. His own pistol was holstered on Thunder's saddle, too far to reach quickly while his arms were full. Funny way to treat a wife, cutting her up and leaving her to die in a creek. The man's expression did not change. "How I discipline my wife is none of your concern, Drifter. Hand her over and we will forget this happened." "No," Isaac said simply. The other 2 men reached for their guns, but the older man held up a hand, stopping them. "You are making a mistake. We are the law in these parts." "A deputy's badge does not give you the right to murder a woman," Isaac said. His mind raced, calculating angles and distances. "And it looks to me like that badge came off a dead man, considering it is bent all to hell and has someone else's initials on it." The man's face darkened. "Last chance." The woman in Isaac's arms shifted, and he felt her hand move to his belt. She pulled his knife from its sheath with trembling fingers, a small blade meant for cutting rope and opening tins. She pressed it into his hand. "His horse," she whispered. "Skittish." Isaac understood in a flash. He waited until the man in the middle opened his mouth to give another order, then threw the knife. Not at the man, but at the ground directly in front of his horse's hooves. The blade struck rock with a sharp crack and a spark, and the horse reared with a scream, hooves flashing. Isaac was already moving. He ran toward the confusion, toward Thunder, gambling everything on surprise and desperation. The other two riders fought to control their own spooked horses. Isaac reached Thunder and turned, using the horse's bulk as a shield while he transferred the woman to Thunder's saddle. She clung to the saddle horn, barely conscious again from the pain of movement. "Go!" Isaac shouted, slapping Thunder's rump. The horse took off at a gallop toward Eagle Pass, carrying the woman to safety. The action had taken perhaps 5 seconds. The man with the bent badge got his horse under control and drew his gun, but Isaac was already diving to the side, rolling in the dust. A shot cracked out, missing him by inches. He came up running, not toward the riders but away from the road, into the scrubland where mounted men would have trouble following. 2 more shots rang out, but Isaac was zigzagging now, using every trick he had learned in years of staying alive in dangerous places. He heard the men shouting to each other, debating whether to chase him or go after the woman. Another gunshot, this one striking a rock near his head and sending chips of stone against his cheek. Then the shooting stopped. Isaac risked a glance back and saw the 3 riders racing after Thunder, after the woman, and his heart sank. But Thunder was fresh and fast, and the horse had a good head start. Isaac changed direction, angling back toward the road behind the riders, and began to run again. His legs were shaking, his arms screaming from the long carry, but he pushed himself harder than he ever had. He had to get to Eagle Pass, had to make sure she made it. The town was less than 2 miles ahead now. He could see the buildings wavering in the heat shimmer on the horizon. Isaac ran until his lungs burned and his vision tunneled. He ran until he tasted blood in his mouth and his legs moved by memory alone. The sun beat down without mercy and the road stretched endless ahead of him, but he did not stop. Could not stop. Thunder appeared ahead, riderless, standing in the middle of the road. Isaac's heart stopped until he saw the horse was positioned protectively over something, and he realized the woman had fallen. He reached them and found her on her side in the dust, blood soaking through the bandages again, but still breathing. "They went past," she whispered when he knelt beside her. "Thunder stopped and I fell. They rode right past us." Isaac looked up and saw it was true. The riders were ahead, still racing toward town, expecting to catch the horse before it reached help. They had not looked back, had not seen Thunder stop or the woman fall. "Clever horse," Isaac said. He gathered her up again, his arms protesting the renewed weight, and this time he did pull himself into Thunder's saddle, settling her across his lap. He could not run anymore, but he could ride. "Hold on," he told her. "Just a little longer." Thunder carried them both at a steady canter, closing the distance to Eagle Pass. Isaac kept watch ahead, seeing the 3 riders finally notice their mistake and wheel their horses around. But it was too late. The first buildings of Eagle Pass rose around them, and people were coming out into the street, drawn by the commotion. "Doctor," Isaac shouted. "I need Dr. Jameson." An older woman pointed toward a white house at the end of the main street. Isaac urged Thunder forward, and they reached it just as the 3 riders entered town. Isaac slid from the saddle with the woman still in his arms and kicked open the door of the doctor's office. Dr. Jameson was a thin man with wire-rimmed spectacles and steady hands. He took one look at the woman and pointed to an examination table. "Put her there." "What happened?" "Knife wounds," Isaac said, laying her down as gently as his exhausted arms could manage. "Lost a lot of blood. She was in the creek when I found her." The doctor was already cutting away the makeshift bandages, revealing the extent of the damage. He sucked in a breath through his teeth. "This is bad. I will need to stitch this immediately and she will need blood. How long has she been bleeding?" "An hour, maybe more," Isaac said. He swayed on his feet and the doctor's assistant, A young man with sandy hair grabbed a chair and shoved it under him. "Sit before you fall down," the assistant said. "You look worse than she does." The door burst open and the three riders crowded in. The man with the bent badge pointed at the woman on the table. "That is my wife, and I am taking her home." Dr. Jameson did not even look up from his work. "This woman has been systematically beaten and cut. These are not accidental wounds." "Sheriff Bennett is already on his way here. I sent Tommy to fetch him the moment you rode into town. You will wait outside." "I am the law," the man started. "You are a thug with a stolen badge," the doctor said coldly. "I was there when Deputy Morrison died 6 months ago, and that is his badge you are wearing. Now get out of my office before you bleed on my clean floor." Isaac looked down and saw blood dripping from his cheek where the rock chip had struck him. He pressed his hand to it absently, still watching the confrontation. The three men clearly wanted to push the issue, but voices were rising outside, and Isaac could hear more people gathering. Eagle Pass was not a large town, but it was civilized with laws and a real sheriff. The man with the bent badge apparently decided the odds were not in his favor. He backed toward the door, his two companions following. "This is not over," he said, looking directly at Isaac. "That is my wife, legally married, and I have rights." "Then you can explain those rights to Sheriff Bennett," Dr. Jameson said, "along with explaining why your wife looks like she went through a meat grinder." The three men left, and Isaac heard them ride out of town fast. He tried to stand to go after them, but his legs gave out and he sat back down hard. "Let them go," the doctor said, finally looking at Isaac. "Bennett will handle it. Right now, I need you to stay calm and keep pressure on that wound on your face. Clara, get me the sutures." Isaac watched as the doctor worked on the woman, his hands moving with practiced efficiency. She was unconscious again, which the doctor said was probably better. The wounds were deep, and the stitching would be painful. Isaac lost count of the number of sutures after 20. An hour passed, maybe more. Isaac drifted in and out of awareness, exhaustion finally catching up with him. Someone brought him water and he drank it without tasting it. Someone else cleaned the cut on his face and put a bandage on it. The doctor's assistant, whose name turned out to be Robert, brought him a shirt to replace the one he had torn up for bandages. Finally, Dr. Jameson stepped back from the examination table, wiping his hands on a clean cloth. "She will live," he said. "She has lost a lot of blood and infection is a concern, but if she makes it through the next few days, she should recover fully. The scars will be significant, though." Isaac finally let himself relax, the tension draining from his body all at once. "Thank you." "You are the one who saved her life," the doctor said. "Robert tells me you carried her the whole way from Creek Road. That is 6 miles. "I did not put her down once," Isaac confirmed. He looked at the woman, now cleaned up and bandaged properly, her chest rising and falling with steady breaths. "She asked me not to give her back to them. I could not." Sheriff Bennett arrived as the sun was setting, a tall man with a salt and pepper beard and sharp eyes. He took Isaac's statement, then the doctor's, and shook his head grimly. "Luke Turner and his boys. I have been trying to catch them in something for months. They run a homestead about 15 miles north of here, and I have had 3 reports of women going missing in that area. Never could prove anything." "The woman," Isaac said. "She said Turner claimed she was his wife." "Probably forced her into it," Bennett said. "Or it is a complete lie. We will sort it out when she wakes. In the meantime, Turner and his men are now wanted for assault with intent to kill, and I will put out notices to all the nearby towns. They will not get far." But Isaac was not so sure. Men like Turner had a way of slipping through the cracks, of disappearing into the vast spaces of Texas until the heat died down. He said as much to the sheriff. Maybe, Bennett admitted. But this time he made a mistake. He left a witness alive and he went up against someone too stubborn to quit. That makes all the difference. Isaac stayed at the doctor's office that night, sleeping in a chair beside the woman's bed. Dr. Jameson tried to convince him to go to the boarding house and get proper rest, but Isaac refused. He wanted to be there when she woke up, needed to see for himself that she really would survive. She woke just before dawn, her eyes fluttering open and focusing slowly on the unfamiliar ceiling. Isaac saw the moment awareness returned and fear followed. She tried to sit up, gasping with pain, and he was there immediately, his hand gentle on her shoulder. "You are safe," he said quietly. "You are in Eagle Pass at the doctor's office. Turner cannot get to you here." She looked at him for a long moment, her eyes searching his face. "You carried me," she said finally. "I remember pieces. You did not stop." "I promised I would not give you back to them," Isaac said. "I keep my promises." Tears filled her eyes, spilling over to run down her temples. "Why, you do not even know me." Isaac considered the question. Why had he risked his life for a stranger? Why had he pushed himself past exhaustion and pain? Why had he sent Thunder to safety while he faced 3 armed men alone? "Because it was the right thing to do," he said simply. "And because when I looked in your eyes, I saw someone worth saving." She cried then, quietly, and Isaac sat with her until the tears stopped. Dr. Jameson came in, checked her wounds, and pronounced himself satisfied with her progress. He brought her water and thin broth, and Isaac helped her drink both, supporting her head when she was too weak to hold it up herself. "What is your name?" Isaac asked finally, remembering his words from the long carry. "I carried you 6 miles, and I figure I deserve to know." She managed a small smile despite the pain. "Lucia Zimmerman," she said, "and you are Isaac Kane. I heard you tell me out on the road. I thought maybe I was dreaming." "Not a dream," Isaac confirmed. "Though maybe a nightmare, at least the parts before I found you." Her smile faded. "How much do you want to know?" "As much as you want to tell me," Isaac said, "but only when you are ready. There is no rush." But Lucia shook her head. "I need to tell someone. I need someone to know what happened in case Turner comes back." So Isaac listened as she told her story. Lucia had been traveling from San Antonio to visit her sister in Del Rio. The stage had broken down 2 days north of Eagle Pass, and while waiting for repairs, she had accepted what she thought was a legitimate offer to stay at a nearby homestead. Turner had seemed respectable at first, almost courteous. But once she was at his property, everything changed. He claimed they had been married in San Antonio, showed her false documents, said she was his wife now and would stay with him. When she tried to leave, he locked her in a room. When she fought back, he beat her. When she managed to escape through a window, he and his men hunted her down. "He caught me at the creek," she said, her voice shaking. "He said I had made him look foolish, running away like that. He said he would teach me what happened to foolish women. He had a knife and he—" She trailed off, unable to continue. Isaac felt rage building in his chest, hot and fierce. He forced it down, kept his voice level. "He will pay for what he did to you. Sheriff Bennett is a good man, and he is looking for Turner now." "It will not matter," Lucia said bitterly. "Even if they catch him, he will say I was his wife, that he had the right to discipline me. The law does not protect women from their husbands." "The law protects people from attempted murder," Isaac said firmly, "and you were never his wife. Those documents were false. You have rights, Lucia, and I will make sure they are upheld." She looked at him with an expression he could not quite read. "Why are you doing this? You should have left me in that creek. It would have been easier, safer for you. Now Turner will come after you too." "Let him come," Isaac said. The words came out harder than he intended, and he softened his tone. "I am not afraid of men like Turner. I have dealt with worse in my time." "Who are you, Isaac Kane?" Lucia asked. "Where do you come from?" Isaac hesitated. His past was not something he shared easily, full of hard memories and harder choices. But Lucia had trusted him with her story, had placed her life in his hands. She deserved honesty in return. "I grew up in Missouri," he said slowly. "My father had a farm, nothing fancy, but it was enough. When I was 19, raiders came through during the war. They killed my father, burned our home. My mother died a year later from grief, I think, though the doctor said it was pneumonia. I had a younger brother, but he died at Shiloh. After that, there was nothing left in Missouri for me." He paused, surprised at how much it still hurt to say it all out loud. "I drifted west, did odd jobs, learned to handle myself in a fight. Spent some time working cattle drives, some time as a ranch hand. I have been in Eagle Pass for about 6 months now, working at the Keystone Ranch. Honest work, decent pay. I was heading into town for supplies when I found you." "I am sorry," Lucia said softly, "about your family." Isaac shrugged, uncomfortable with sympathy. "It was a long time ago. I have made my peace with it." But looking at Lucia, seeing the pain and fear in her eyes, Isaac felt something shift inside him. He had been drifting for so long, moving from place to place without purpose or direction. He had convinced himself that he preferred it that way, that he did not need roots or connections. But in the span of a few hours, everything had changed. Lucia Zimmerman had crashed into his life like a lightning strike, and suddenly the thought of drifting away again felt wrong. "Rest now," he said gently. "You need to heal." "Will you stay?" she asked, her hand finding his. "I know it is a lot to ask, but I am frightened that he will come back." Isaac squeezed her hand carefully. "I will be right here," he promised, "for as long as you need me." Over the next 3 days, Isaac barely left Lucia's side. He slept in the chair, ate meals brought by the doctor's housekeeper, and helped Lucia with everything from drinking water to sitting up when her wounds allowed it. Dr. Jameson remarked more than once that he had never seen someone so dedicated to a stranger. But Lucia did not feel like a stranger to Isaac. In the quiet hours of recovery, they talked about everything and nothing. Lucia told him about growing up in San Antonio, about her parents who had died of yellow fever when she was 16, about her older sister Margaret who had married and moved to Del Rio. Isaac told her about learning to ride before he could walk, about summer storms on the Missouri plains, about the first time he saw the wide, open spaces of Texas and felt like he could breathe again. They discovered they both loved reading, though books were rare and precious in their worlds. They both preferred coffee over tea, morning over evening, horses over mules. Lucia had a sharp wit that surfaced more as she healed, making observations about Dr. Jameson's fussy nature and Robert's tendency to trip over his own feet that made Isaac laugh despite himself. On the 4th day, Sheriff Bennett returned with news. "We found Turner's homestead," he said grimly. "Place was abandoned, burned to the ground. Looks like they torched it themselves and ran. I am sorry, Miss Zimmerman, but the trail goes cold after that. They could be in Mexico by now, or New Mexico, or anywhere really." Lucia took the news better than Isaac expected. "At least he is gone," she said. "At least I do not have to worry about him coming back here." But Isaac saw the way her hands trembled, the way her eyes darted to the windows. She was frightened, and she had every right to be. Men like Turner did not forget slights, did not forgive escapes. He might be gone for now, but there was always a chance he would return. "What will you do?" Isaac asked her that evening after the sheriff had left. "Where will you go?" Lucia was quiet for a long moment. "I suppose I will continue on to Del Rio," she said finally. "Margaret is expecting me. I am sure she will take me in until I figure out what comes next." The thought of Lucia leaving filled Isaac with an unexpected sense of loss. He told himself he was being foolish. He had known her less than a week. But the hours spent at her bedside, the conversations and shared silences, had created a bond he could not quite explain. "What about you?" Lucia asked. "Will you go back to the Keystone Ranch?" Isaac nodded. "I have a job there, obligations, but Eagle Pass is not far. I come to town fairly regularly for supplies and such." "I see," Lucia said, and Isaac thought he detected disappointment in her voice, but he might have been imagining it. By the end of the first week, Lucia was able to sit up without help and take short walks around the office with Robert supporting her arm. Her color had returned, and the wounds were healing cleanly, though Dr. Jameson warned that she would always carry the scars. Lucia accepted this with a pragmatism that Isaac admired. "Scars are just proof that you survived," she said when the doctor brought it up. "I will wear them with pride." Isaac found himself watching her more than he should, noticing the way lamplight caught gold highlights in her dark hair, the way her eyes crinkled when she smiled, the determined set of her jaw when she pushed herself to walk a little farther each day. She was beautiful, but it was more than that. She was strong in a way that had nothing to do with physical strength, resilient in the face of trauma that would have broken someone else. On the 10th day, Lucia announced her intention to continue her journey to Del Rio as soon as Dr. Jameson cleared her for travel. Isaac helped her write a letter to her sister, explaining what had happened and when to expect her. Margaret's reply came back within 3 days, full of concern and relief and insistence that Lucia come immediately. "The stage runs to Del Rio twice a week," Lucia said, studying the schedule. "If Dr. Jameson approves, I could leave on Friday." Friday was 4 days away. Isaac felt those 4 days like a countdown, each one bringing him closer to saying goodbye to someone he had just found. He told himself he was being ridiculous, that this was the natural end of things. He had saved her life, she had healed, and now she would move on. That was how these things worked. But on Wednesday evening, as he sat beside her bed reading aloud from a borrowed copy of Pride and Prejudice, Lucia reached over and took the book from his hands. "Isaac," she said quietly. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Why have you stayed here all this time?" she asked. "You saved my life and I am grateful, but you did not have to spend nearly 2 weeks sleeping in a chair and reading to me. You have a job, a life. Why did you stay?" Isaac looked at her, at the directness in her eyes, and knew she deserved an honest answer. "Because I did not want to leave," he said simply. "Because in all my years of drifting, I have never met anyone like you. Because when I think about you getting on that stage and riding out of my life forever, I feel like I am losing something important." Lucia's breath caught. "Isaac." "I know it is foolish," he continued, the words tumbling out now that he had started. "I know we barely know each other, that circumstances threw us together in the worst possible way. But I cannot shake the feeling that finding you was not an accident, that carrying you those 6 miles changed something fundamental inside me." "It was not foolish," Lucia said softly. "I have been feeling the same way. Every time I think about leaving Eagle Pass, about leaving you, my chest tightens. I tell myself it is just gratitude, that I am confused because you saved my life. But it does not feel like gratitude. It feels like something else entirely." Isaac moved from his chair to sit on the edge of her bed, careful not to jostle her injuries. "What does it feel like?" "Like I found something I did not know I was looking for," Lucia said. She reached up and touched his face, her fingers gentle on his cheek. "Like maybe all the terrible things that happened were leading me to that creek, to you." Isaac covered her hand with his own, turning his face to press a kiss to her palm. "Stay," he said. "Do not get on that stage. Stay here, give this a chance. Give us a chance." "I cannot stay in the doctor's office forever," Lucia said, but she was smiling. And I have no money, no prospects. What would I do here? There are rooms at the boarding house, Isaac said, his mind already racing ahead. I have some money saved, enough to cover a few months' rent while you figure things out. Eagle Pass has a school that is looking for a teacher, and I know you read and write well. Or there is work at the general store or the dressmaker's shop. Lucia, if you want to stay, we will find a way to make it work. And what about Turner? Lucia asked, her smile fading. What if he comes back? Then I will deal with him, Isaac said firmly. But I do not think he will. Men like that are cowards at heart. They run when things get difficult. And even if he does come back, you will not face him alone. I promise you that. Lucia was quiet for a long moment, her eyes searching his face. Then she nodded slowly. Okay, she said. I will stay. I will write to Margaret and explain, and I will stay here in Eagle Pass. With you. Isaac felt relief and joy wash over him in equal measure. He leaned forward carefully and pressed his forehead to hers, breathing her in. You will not regret this, he promised. I know I will not, Lucia whispered back. Dr. Jameson was less than thrilled when they told him of their decision, warning them about the dangers of making life-changing choices based on heightened emotions after trauma. But he also arranged for Lucia to move into the boarding house run by his widowed sister, and he even spoke to the school board on her behalf about the teaching position. The boarding house was a comfortable two-story building on a quiet street, run by Martha Jameson, who turned out to be as efficient and no-nonsense as her brother. She gave Lucia a sunny room on the second floor and charged a rate that Isaac suspected was lower than normal. When he tried to pay for several months in advance, Martha waved him off. Pay month by month like everyone else, she said briskly. And Miss Zimmerman can work off some of her rent by helping with laundry and cooking. I am not running a charity here. But her eyes were kind when she looked at Lucia, and Isaac knew the older woman had a soft heart beneath the stern exterior. Isaac returned to the Keystone Ranch to face his boss, Jack Morrison, and explain his 2-week absence. He expected anger, possibly even termination, but Morrison surprised him. Heard what you did, the ranch owner said gruffly. Heard you saved that girl from Luke Turner. That took guts, Kane. You can have your job back and your pay for the time you were gone. Anyone who would carry a wounded woman 6 miles on foot is the kind of man I want working for me. Isaac was back to working the ranch, but he rode into Eagle Pass every evening after his shift ended, spending a few hours with Lucia before riding back in the dark. It was exhausting, but he would not have changed it for anything. Lucia settled into life at the boarding house and surprised everyone by charming the school board into giving her the teaching position despite her lack of formal training. She had a natural way with children and a sharp mind for mathematics and literature. The school was small, only about 20 students ranging from 6 to 14, but Lucia threw herself into the work with enthusiasm. I never thought about teaching before, she told Isaac one evening as they walked through town together. She was still moving carefully, her wounds not fully healed, but Dr. Jameson had cleared her for light activity. But I love it. The children are so eager to learn, even the ones who pretend they are not. You are good at it, Isaac said. He had visited the schoolhouse once and watched through the window as Lucia led her students through a geography lesson, her face animated as she described places far beyond Eagle Pass. You make learning seem like an adventure. Autumn came to South Texas, bringing cooler temperatures and occasional rain. Lucia's wounds healed into the scars Dr. Jameson had predicted, long pale lines across her back and ribs that she viewed with a matter-of-fact acceptance. She grew stronger, more confident, and the shadow of fear that had haunted her eyes gradually faded. Isaac found himself falling more in love with her with each passing day. It was not a sudden thing but a gradual realization, like watching the sun rise incrementally until suddenly the world was bright. He loved the way she hummed while she worked, the way she argued with him about literature and politics, the way she cared for her students with patience and dedication. He loved her strength and her vulnerability, her laughter and her occasional tears when memories of her trauma surfaced. They spent as much time together as their responsibilities allowed. Isaac taught Lucia to ride properly, and she proved to be a natural horsewoman, fearless despite her ordeal. They rode out to the creek where he had found her, and Lucia stood for a long moment looking at the water. "I was so scared," she said quietly. "I thought I was going to die there, alone and forgotten, but then you came and everything changed." "You are the bravest person I know," Isaac told her. "You survived something that would have destroyed most people, and you came out stronger." Winter brought its own challenges. The school board could only afford to pay Lucia a modest salary, and even with her room and board partially covered, money was tight. Isaac tried to help, but Lucia had her pride and refused to let him pay for everything. They found creative ways to stretch their resources, packing lunches to share instead of buying food in town, mending their own clothes instead of paying the seamstress, finding entertainment in long walks and borrowed books rather than costly diversions. It was during one of these walks, on a December evening with stars bright overhead, that Isaac finally found the courage to speak the words that had been building in his heart for months. "Lucia, I love you," he said, stopping in the middle of the quiet street and turning to face her. "I have loved you since I carried you those 6 miles and you looked up at me with those fierce eyes and told me not to give you back. Maybe even before that, the moment I saw you in that creek and felt my whole world shift. I love you, and I want to spend my life with you if you will have me." Lucia's eyes filled with tears, but she was smiling. "Isaac Kane, I have loved you since you promised you would keep me safe and actually kept that promise. Since you sat beside my bed for 2 weeks and read to me and held my hand through the nightmares. I love you with everything I have, and yes, I will have you, for as long as you want me." "Forever then," Isaac said, and kissed her under the Texas stars while the whole universe seemed to hold its breath. They were married in January of 1881, in a simple ceremony at the Eagle Pass Church with Sheriff Bennett and Martha Jameson as witnesses. Lucia wore a dress that Martha had helped her make, simple but elegant, and she carried wildflowers that Isaac had ridden 20 miles to find. Dr. Jameson gave her away, gruff and proud, and there was not a dry eye in the small congregation. They spent their wedding night at the boarding house, Isaac having finally rented his own room there after months of riding back and forth to the ranch. Martha had decorated the room with candles and wildflowers, and she tactfully made herself scarce. They made love gently, Isaac careful of Lucia's scars, and afterward she cried against his chest, telling him they were happy tears, that she had never imagined finding this kind of joy after everything that had happened. "You saved me in more ways than one," she whispered. "You gave me my life back, and then you gave me a reason to live it." "You saved me too," Isaac told her. "I was just drifting before I found you, existing but not really living. You gave me purpose, a future. You gave me everything." Married life agreed with them both. Isaac continued working at the Keystone Ranch, and Morrison promoted him to foreman after the previous foreman retired. The position came with better pay and a small house on the ranch property. It was nothing fancy, just 2 rooms and a kitchen, but it was theirs. Lucia continued teaching, becoming beloved by her students and their parents alike. She started a small lending library in the schoolhouse, collecting donated books and carefully cataloging them. Spring brought news that Luke Turner had been arrested in New Mexico for attempting to abduct another woman. He was tried, convicted, and sentenced to 20 years in prison. Sheriff Bennett sent them a telegram with the news, and Lucia cried again, this time with relief. "It is over," she said. "Really, truly over. He cannot hurt anyone else now." But even with Turner behind bars, Isaac noticed that Lucia still had nightmares sometimes, waking in the dark, gasping and afraid. He learned to hold her through them, to talk her back to reality with a calm voice and steady presence. Slowly, gradually, the nightmares came less frequently, until months could pass between them. Summer brought a different kind of news. Lucia came home from Dr. Jameson's office in July with a strange expression on her face, caught somewhere between joy and terror. Isaac dropped the horseshoe he had been examining and went to her immediately. "What is wrong? Are you ill?" "No," Lucia said slowly. "Not ill. Isaac, I am pregnant." Isaac felt the world stop, then start again faster than before. "Pregnant," he repeated. "We are having a baby." "We are having a baby," Lucia confirmed, and then she laughed, the sound bright and clear. "Isaac, we are going to be parents." He picked her up and spun her around, careful despite his enthusiasm, and kissed her until they were both breathless. A baby. Their baby. The thought filled him with a joy so fierce it was almost frightening. The pregnancy progressed smoothly, though Lucia suffered from terrible nausea in the first few months. Isaac hovered anxiously, driving her to distraction with his concern, until she finally banned him from fussing over her every moment. She taught through her 6th month, then reluctantly agreed to take leave when climbing the stairs to the schoolhouse became too difficult. Their son was born in March of 1882, during a spring storm that rattled the windows and made the whole world feel wild and new. The labor was long and difficult, and Isaac wore a path in the floor of the waiting room until Dr. Jameson came out looking exhausted but pleased. "You have a son," he said. "A big, healthy boy, and Lucia is fine, tired but fine. You can go see them now." Isaac found Lucia in bed, pale and exhausted but radiant, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in soft blankets. She looked up when he entered, and her smile was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. "Meet your son," she said softly. Isaac approached slowly, almost reverently, and looked down at the small face peeking out from the blankets. The baby had dark hair like his mother and a serious expression that reminded Isaac of his own father. Tiny fingers curled against Lucia's chest, and Isaac felt his heart expand in a way he had not known was possible. "He is perfect," Isaac whispered. "You are both perfect." "What should we name him?" Lucia asked. They had discussed names throughout the pregnancy but never settled on anything definite. Now, looking at his son, Isaac knew exactly what the boy's name should be. "Thomas," he said. "After my brother, if that is all right with you." Lucia's eyes softened. "Thomas Kane. I love it. Hello, Thomas. Welcome to the world." Parenthood was harder than either of them anticipated and more wonderful. Thomas was a colicky baby who cried for hours at a time, and Isaac and Lucia took turns walking him around the small house, singing and rocking and doing everything they could think of to soothe him. They were exhausted and overwhelmed and happier than they had ever been. Lucia returned to teaching when Thomas was 6 months old, and Martha Jameson agreed to watch him during school hours. The arrangement worked well, and Thomas thrived under Martha's no-nonsense care. He grew into a sturdy toddler with his mother's dark eyes and his father's stubborn determination. Life settled into a comfortable rhythm. Isaac worked the ranch, Lucia taught school, and they raised their son with love and patience. The small house on the ranch property became a home filled with laughter and books and the chaos of family life. They added a room when Lucia became pregnant again, this time with a daughter they named Elizabeth after Lucia's mother. Elizabeth was an easier baby than Thomas had been. sunny and content where her brother had been fussy and demanding. Thomas adored her from the moment he met her, and they were inseparable as they grew. The house that had once seemed adequate now felt cramped with 2 children, and Isaac spent his spare time that year building an addition, expanding their home to accommodate their growing family. Years passed in a blur of school programs and ranch work, of teaching children to read and teaching horses to trust, of late nights with sick babies and early mornings with coffee and quiet conversation. Isaac's hair began to show gray at the temples, and Lucia developed laugh lines around her eyes. They grew older together, their love deepening with each year, each challenge overcome, each joy shared. Thomas grew tall and strong with his father's gift for horses and his mother's sharp mind. He started helping at the ranch as soon as he was old enough, following Isaac around like a shadow and absorbing everything his father taught him. Elizabeth inherited her mother's love of books and her father's stubbornness, a combination that made her formidable even as a child. She announced at age 7 that she would be a doctor like Dr. Jameson, and no amount of explaining about how difficult that would be for a woman could dissuade her. "Then I will be the first," she said with such confidence that Isaac and Lucia could only laugh and agree that yes, she probably would be. The years were not without their sorrows. Martha Jameson passed away peacefully in her sleep when Thomas was 10 and Elizabeth was 7. Her loss hit them all hard, especially Lucia, who had come to think of the older woman as a second mother. Dr. Jameson retired shortly after, his grief making it impossible to continue working, and a younger doctor named Harrison took over his practice. Jack Morrison died of a heart attack when Thomas was 12, and his widow sold the Keystone Ranch to a businessman from Houston. The new owner kept Isaac on as foreman, recognizing his value and experience, but the ranch felt different without Morrison's steady presence. Through it all, Isaac and Lucia's love remained constant. They still took evening walks when time allowed, still read to each other before bed, still found excuses to touch and kiss and remind each other of what they meant to one another. The scars on Lucia's back and ribs had faded with time to thin silver lines, and Isaac kissed them sometimes, grateful for what they represented: survival, strength, and the beginning of everything they had built together. On their 10th anniversary, Isaac took Lucia back to Creek Road, to the spot where he had found her all those years ago. They stood together looking at the water, holding hands, and Isaac thought about that day, about the choice he had made to stop and help, to carry her 6 miles without putting her down once. "You ever wonder what would have happened if someone else had found me?" Lucia asked quietly. "If you had ridden past, if you had been delayed somehow." "Every day," Isaac admitted. "And every day I thank God that I was the one who found you, that I got to be the one to save you, to love you, to build this life with you." "I would have died there," Lucia said matter-of-factly. "If not from the wounds, then from exposure or Turner coming back. You did not just save my life that day, Isaac. You gave me a future I never could have imagined. You gave me everything." "No," Isaac said, turning to face her. "You gave me everything. I was half alive before I found you, going through the motions of living without really experiencing it. You taught me what it means to really live, to love, to have purpose beyond just surviving. You and our children are the best things that ever happened to me." They kissed there by the creek, and it felt like completing a circle, returning to where everything had started and acknowledging how far they had come. Thomas was 15 and Elizabeth was 12 when Lucia discovered she was pregnant again, a surprise that left them both stunned and laughing. They had assumed their family was complete, but apparently fate had other plans. Their youngest daughter, Anna, was born in the fall of 1897, and her arrival brought new energy to their household. Thomas and Elizabeth doted on their baby sister, and Anna grew up surrounded by love and attention. By the time Anna was 5, Thomas was 20 and working full-time at the ranch beside his father, having long since proven himself as capable and trustworthy as any man twice his age. Elizabeth, 17 and fierce, had somehow convinced Dr. Harrison to take her on as an apprentice, and she spent her days learning everything she could about medicine and healing. She talked constantly about going to a medical school in the East, and Isaac had already started saving money to make that dream possible. Isaac was in his 50s now, his hair more gray than brown, his body bearing the marks of decades of hard work. But he was happy, deeply and profoundly happy in a way he had never imagined possible during those long years of drifting. Every morning he woke beside Lucia, and every night he fell asleep with her in his arms, and that simple fact never stopped feeling like a miracle. Lucia, approaching 50 herself, had retired from full-time teaching but still tutored struggling students in the evenings and had started writing a book about frontier education. Her hair was streaked with silver, and her hands bore the calluses of a life well lived. She was more beautiful to Isaac now than she had been at 23, her beauty deepened by experience and love and time. They were sitting on their porch one summer evening, watching Anna play in the yard while the sun set in brilliant colors, when Lucia turned to him with a contented sigh. "We did well, did we not?" she said. "Look at what we built from that terrible day at the creek. A family, a home, a life." Isaac pulled her close, kissing the top of her head. "We did better than well. We did extraordinarily." "Do you ever regret it?" Lucia asked. "Stopping that day, getting involved, turning your whole life upside down for a stranger?" Isaac pretended to consider the question, then laughed when Lucia elbowed him gently. "Not for a single second," he said seriously. "That was the best decision I ever made. Carrying you those 6 miles was the beginning of everything good in my life. I would do it again in a heartbeat, 100 times over if it meant ending up here with you." "I love you," Lucia said simply. "I have loved you since you refused to give up on me, and I will love you until the day I die and beyond if such things are possible." "They are possible," Isaac said confidently. "And I will love you just as long. You are my heart, Lucia. You always have been." They sat together as the sun finished setting and the stars began to emerge, holding hands like they had on so many evenings over the past 20 years. Anna eventually tired herself out and came to sit between them, and they wrapped her in their arms, a family unit complete and content. More years passed, bringing new challenges and joys. Elizabeth left for medical school in Philadelphia, and they all cried when she boarded the train, though the tears were equal parts sadness and pride. She wrote long letters detailing her studies and her determination to prove that women could be doctors just as capable as men. Isaac saved every letter, bound them carefully, and kept them in a special box. Thomas married at 24, a sweet girl named Sarah from a neighboring ranch, and they started their own family quickly. Isaac and Lucia became grandparents when Thomas's wife gave birth to twin boys, and holding his grandsons for the first time, Isaac felt the same overwhelming love he had experienced when Thomas was born. Anna grew into a quiet, thoughtful girl who loved horses almost as much as her father and brother. She had no interest in teaching or medicine, but instead wanted to work with animals. When she announced at 14 that she intended to become a veterinarian, Isaac and Lucia exchanged glances and then smiled. Of course, their youngest would choose a path just as unconventional as her siblings. Lucia's book about frontier education was published when Anna was 16, and though it did not make them wealthy, it sold respectably and earned Lucia recognition throughout Texas as an expert on rural schooling. She gave lectures occasionally, and Isaac accompanied her, proud of his wife's accomplishments and intelligence. Life was not without its difficulties. The new owner of the Keystone Ranch sold it again when Thomas was 28, and the new buyer brought in his own foreman. Isaac found himself out of a job for the first time in decades. He was 60 years old, too young to retire but old enough that finding new work was challenging. He spent weeks looking for something, anything, growing increasingly frustrated and worried. It was Thomas who provided the solution. He and Sarah had been saving money, and with a loan from the bank and contributions from Isaac and Lucia's savings, they bought a small piece of land and started their own ranch. It was modest, only 100 acres with a small herd, but it was theirs. Isaac worked alongside his son, and though the days were long and the profit margins thin, he found satisfaction in building something that would belong to the family for generations. Elizabeth finished medical school and returned to Texas, setting up practice in San Antonio, where there was more acceptance for female doctors than in smaller towns. She married a fellow doctor, and they made a formidable team, both dedicated to serving their community. She visited Eagle Pass regularly, and her parents made trips to San Antonio to visit her and their growing number of grandchildren. Anna, true to her word, found a way to study veterinary medicine, traveling to Colorado where a progressive school was accepting women into their program. She returned certified and ready to work, and she set up practice on the family ranch, treating livestock and horses and building a reputation for skill and patience. Isaac was 70 when he had his first heart scare, collapsing while working a young horse. Thomas found him and got him to Dr. Harrison quickly, and the doctor was blunt about his diagnosis. Isaac's heart was weak, damaged by years of hard work and stress. He needed to slow down to rest more, to take better care of himself. Lucia was terrified. She had nightmares of losing Isaac, of being left alone after so many years together. Isaac held her through her fears, promising to follow the doctor's orders, to take things easier. And he did, mostly, though giving up the work he loved was difficult. They spent more time together, taking slow walks, sitting on the porch, watching their grandchildren play. Thomas and Sarah's twins were 12 now, sturdy boys who reminded Isaac painfully of Thomas at that age. Elizabeth visited more often, bringing her own children, and Anna stopped by daily to check on her father with a veterinarian's careful eye. On their 40th anniversary, the whole family gathered at the ranch Thomas and Sarah had built. There were grandchildren running everywhere, 13 in total, ranging from infants to teenagers. There was food and laughter and music, and Isaac sat in the middle of it all feeling overwhelmingly blessed. Lucia sat beside him, her hair completely silver now, her face lined with age but still beautiful to him. She caught him watching her and smiled, the same smile that had captivated him 40 years ago. "What are you thinking?" she asked. "That I am the luckiest man who ever lived," Isaac said honestly. "That finding you bleeding by that creek was the beginning of the best 40 years anyone could ask for. That I love you more now than I did then, which I did not think was possible." "We have had a good life," Lucia said, leaning into him. "A very good life, but I am not ready for it to be over yet. You scared me with that heart incident, Isaac Kane. I need you to stay around a while longer." "I plan to," Isaac promised. "I want to see those grandchildren grow up, want to watch them have children of their own. I want another 40 years with you if I can get them." "Let us start with 10 and see how we do," Lucia said pragmatically, but her eyes were soft. Isaac did make it another 10 years, though they were harder than the ones that came before. His heart continued to weaken, and he had several more scares that sent the family into panic. But each time, he recovered, stubborn and determined not to leave Lucia alone. He cut back on physical work, spent more time in a chair on the porch, but his mind remained sharp, and his love for his family never wavered. He was 80 years old when he finally ran out of time. It was a quiet morning in March, the same month Thomas had been born so many years ago. Isaac woke beside Lucia as he had for 49 years of marriage, kissed her good morning as was his habit, and told her he loved her. Then he got up, got dressed, and went out to the porch to watch the sunrise. Lucia found him there an hour later, slumped peacefully in his chair, a slight smile on his face. The doctor said later that his heart had simply given out, that it had been a peaceful death, and Lucia took comfort in that even as grief threatened to overwhelm her. The funeral was enormous. Isaac had touched so many lives over his 80 years, had been a respected member of the community for decades. People came from all over Texas to pay their respects, to share stories of his kindness and integrity and strength. Lucia stood between her 3 children, surrounded by her grandchildren, and listened to people talk about the man she had loved for half a century. But it was Thomas who gave the eulogy that truly captured who Isaac Kane had been. He stood before the crowd, tall and gray-haired himself now, and spoke with a voice that only trembled slightly. "My father was a hero," Thomas said simply. "Not because he fought in wars or did grand dramatic things, though he did his share of both. He was a hero because when he saw someone who needed help, he helped them. When he found my mother bleeding and dying by Creek Road, he could have ridden past. He could have gotten help and left her there. Instead, he picked her up and carried her 6 miles without stopping once. And then, instead of moving on with his life, he stayed. He loved her. He built a family with her. He showed all of us what it means to commit completely to the people you love." Thomas paused, gathering himself. "My father taught me how to work hard, how to be honest, how to treat people with respect regardless of who they were. But most importantly, he taught me how to love completely, without reservation or conditions. He loved my mother that way for 49 years. He loved his children and grandchildren that way. And because of the example he set, we all know how to love better than we would have otherwise. That is his legacy. Not land or money or accomplishments, but love. Pure, simple, enduring love." Lucia cried through the whole service, leaning on her children, supported by her grandchildren. She had known this day would come eventually, had tried to prepare herself, but nothing could truly prepare you for losing the person who had been your other half for so long. The weeks after Isaac's death were the hardest of Lucia's life, harder even than her ordeal with Turner all those years ago. She wandered through the house seeing Isaac in every corner, every chair, every book on the shelf. She woke in the night reaching for him and finding only empty space. The grief was a physical thing, crushing and relentless. But she had her children and her grandchildren, and they would not let her sink into despair. They visited constantly, made sure she ate, made sure she left the house, made sure she knew she was loved. Slowly, incrementally, the grief became something she could bear. It never went away, but it transformed from an acute pain to a chronic ache, present always but manageable. Lucia lived another 7 years after Isaac's death. She spent them surrounded by family, watching her grandchildren grow into adults, welcoming great-grandchildren into the world. She finished writing her memoirs, a book she dedicated to Isaac, telling the story of their life together from the moment he found her to the moment he left her. It was published 6 months before she died, and it became a local bestseller, their love story touching everyone who read it. On a spring morning with wildflowers blooming outside her window and her family gathered around her bed, Lucia Zimmerman Kane closed her eyes for the last time. She was 87 years old, surrounded by 3 generations of the family she and Isaac had created, and her last words were simple and clear. "I am coming, Isaac," she said with a smile. "I am finally coming home to you." They buried her beside Isaac, under a spreading oak tree on the ranch Thomas had built. The headstone was simple, bearing both their names and the dates of their births and deaths. But beneath that, Thomas had added an inscription that told their whole story in just a few words. He carried her 6 miles and loved her for 50 years, together forever. The family gathered there often, especially on anniversaries and special occasions. They told the story of Isaac and Lucia to each new generation, making sure the tale of the cowboy who found a woman bleeding by Creek Road and refused to give up on her would never be forgotten. It became a family legend, a touchstone, a reminder of what real love looked like. Thomas ran the ranch until he was too old to continue, then passed it to his own sons, who passed it to theirs. Elizabeth's children became doctors and teachers, carrying on both their grandparents' legacies. Anna's veterinary practice grew into one of the most respected in South Texas, and her children followed in her footsteps, caring for animals with the same dedication she had learned from watching her father care for horses. The small house Isaac had built and expanded over the years was eventually replaced by a larger, more modern structure, but the family kept the original front door, the one Isaac had carried Lucia through as a bride. It was mounted in the new house, a piece of history preserved and honored. Time passed, as it always does. The frontier gave way to modernity, the Wild West became domesticated, and Texas transformed from a rough territory to a sophisticated state. But in the Kane family, the story remained alive. Parents told their children, who told their children, who told theirs. The story of a cowboy who found a woman bleeding by Creek Road and carried her 6 miles without stopping once. Who stayed when he could have left, who loved when it would have been easier not to, who built a life and a legacy from a single act of compassion and courage. The story of Lucia, who survived the unsurvivable, who found strength in the aftermath of trauma, who took the second chance she was given and lived fully and completely. It was a story about love, yes, but also about choice. About the moments that define us, the decisions we make when faced with someone else's suffering, the courage it takes to commit to another person completely. It was a story about 2 people who found each other at their most vulnerable and built something beautiful from that foundation of pain and hope. And it was a story with a happy ending, because Isaac and Lucia got 50 years together, built a family, created a legacy, and loved each other until death finally parted them. And even then, the family believed, even in death, they were not truly parted. Somewhere, somehow, they were together still. The cowboy and the woman he carried 6 miles, still holding hands, still in love, still proving that sometimes the worst moments of our lives can lead to the very best ones. The ranch still stands today, passed down through 6 generations of Kanes. On the property, not far from the main house, there is a historical marker that tells the story of Isaac and Lucia. Tourists occasionally stop to read it, touched by the tale of frontier love and survival. The creek where Isaac found Lucia has been renamed Kane Creek in their honor, and there is a small plaque at the exact spot where she lay dying until a cowboy on a simple supply run changed both their fates forever. Every year on the anniversary of that day, the Kane family gathers at the creek. They bring wildflowers and lay them in the water, a tribute to the woman who survived and the man who saved her. The youngest children, hearing the story for the first time, listen with wide eyes and ask questions. Did it really happen that way? Did he really carry her 6 miles? Did they really love each other that much? And the answer, passed down with certainty through the generations, is always the same. Yes, every word is true. Isaac Kane found Lucia Zimmerman bleeding by Creek Road on a June day in 1880, and he carried her 6 miles to safety without stopping once. And from that act of courage and compassion grew a love that lasted a lifetime and a legacy that endures to this day. It is a story about the Wild West, about survival against odds, about the strength it takes to rebuild after trauma. But more than anything, it is a love story, pure and simple. The kind of love story that reminds us that even in the darkest moments, hope exists. That even when we are at our most broken, someone might come along willing to carry us. That love, real love, is not just a feeling but a choice we make every single day. Isaac chose to stop when he could have kept riding. He chose to carry Lucia when he could have left her. He chose to stay when he could have drifted away. And Lucia chose to trust him, to heal, to stay in Eagle Pass, to build a life with a man she barely knew. Every day they chose each other, over and over, until those daily choices added up to 50 years of marriage and a family that would span generations. That is the legacy of Isaac Kane and Lucia Zimmerman. Not land or wealth or accomplishments, though they achieved all of those things in their way. Their true legacy is the example they set, the love they shared, the family they created. They showed everyone who knew them and everyone who has heard their story since what commitment really means, what courage really looks like, what love can accomplish when two people decide to face the world together. Their great-great-great-grandchildren tell the story now, in a world Isaac and Lucia could never have imagined, with technology and conveniences beyond their wildest dreams. But the core of the story remains unchanged, relevant across time and circumstance. Because love is timeless, courage is universal, and the choice to help someone in need, to commit to someone completely, to build something beautiful from something terrible, that choice is available to every generation, in every era. The story of the cowboy who found her bleeding by Creek Road and carried her 6 miles without stopping once is not just history. It is inspiration. It is a reminder that our choices matter, that our actions have consequences that ripple out far beyond what we can see, that a single moment of compassion can change not just one life, but generations of lives. Isaac and Lucia never knew they would become legends in their own family, that their story would be told and retold for over 100 years. They were just two people trying to survive, trying to heal, trying to build something good from something terrible. But that is exactly what makes their story so powerful. They were not special or chosen or destined. They were ordinary people who made extraordinary choices and loved each other through everything that followed. And in the end, is that not what we all hope for? To be loved completely, to have someone who will carry us through the hard miles without stopping, to build something that lasts beyond our own lives. Isaac and Lucia found that with each other, and in finding it, they gave a gift to everyone who has heard their story since, the gift of hope. The gift of believing that love can survive anything, that courage exists in ordinary people, that happy endings are possible even after the most traumatic beginnings. Their story proves that the worst day of your life might just be the day that leads you to your greatest happiness, that the person who saves you might become the love of your life, that 6 miles can be the distance between death and destiny. So the story continues, passed from generation to generation, kept alive by a family that understands the treasure they have in their history. And every time the story is told, Isaac carries Lucia those 6 miles again, refusing to give up, refusing to stop, driven by something he probably did not even understand at the time, but that would define the rest of his life. Love. Simple, powerful, enduring love. That is the story of Isaac Kane and Lucia Zimmerman, the cowboy and the woman he found bleeding by Creek Road. It is a story about the Wild West. Yes, but more than that. It is a story about the wild and wonderful unpredictability of love, and the extraordinary things that happen when two people decide to face the world together, no matter what. And it is a story that, as long as there are Kanes to tell it, will never truly end.